And now I am pleased to introduce our presenter for today's webinar. I am joined by Matthew Smith. Matthew has a PhD in organic chemistry from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and has been a full-time faculty member at Walters State Community College since 2010, where he primarily teaches chemistry for majors courses, including organic chemistry. As an educator, he is focused on developing new, innovative methods of engaging students inside and outside of the classroom and applying these techniques into a flipped classroom. He also serves as a natural science team leader for mobile technology training, as a Tennessee Board of Regents consultant for a pilot of Go class, and a Walters State Mobile Fellow. Away from school, Matthew enjoys spending time with his wife, Beth, their 3 children, and preparing for their twins set to arrive in June, as well as attempting to improve his golf game. So, Matthew, thank you so much for taking your time to join us this afternoon. And if you're ready to get started, I can go ahead and give you the screen.
Okay, yes, that will be fine. Thank you for the introduction. Okay, hopefully everyone can see the screen. Let's see. Make sure I can view what you're viewing. There we go. Okay, so as Sarah said, I'm Matthew Smith. I teach chemistry at Walters State Community College, and we're going to talk a little bit about some things that I'm doing in my flipped classroom. I realize that the chances of everyone in attendance today being a chemist are slim to none, so we are going to talk some chemistry, but I'm going to try to keep things in a general format so that you leave with the concept that what I'm doing in my classroom can apply to your classroom, even if it is not a chemistry classroom. I do teach at Walters State, and we are located in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. Walters State has been involved in mobilization for several years now, and we always welcome visitors, faculty members, institutions who are eager to get started in mobile learning. The Smoky Mountains are beautiful if you've never seen them. I've never been to the Northeast. I hear the Northeast in the fall is great, but I don't know that it compares to the Smoky Mountains in the fall. So if you do decide to visit the area, I recommend that you come in the fall. Walters State is also an Apple Distinguished program, and this designation is reserved for programs that meet criteria for innovation, leadership, and educational excellence that also demonstrate a clear vision of outstanding learning initiatives. And we worked very hard for that and are quite proud of it. And what I'm going to show you today is only a small portion of the way classrooms at Walters State have been flipped and other mobile learning technologies that are going on that have helped us achieve this designation. One question that always pops up is, what is a flipped classroom? And every time that I ask this question, I never get the same answer twice. The flipped classroom for you is going to probably look completely different than my flipped classroom. If you were to walk into a flipped classroom, you would ultimately be able to tell this is a flipped classroom, but what you're doing is not necessarily going to be what I'm doing. But every flipped classroom does share one common thing, and that is what normally happens in lecture is going to occur at home, and what used to occur at home is now going to occur in lecture. So if you look at the traditional approach, it's very structured. Students come to class, they take notes during a lecture that is given by a professor. They go home, and depending upon how strict your syllabus is and your grading rubric, they are either required to solve problems, or you hope that they solve problems at home in order to practice the material that you just talked about. In the flipped classroom, I left the scale or the things that are on the scale very vague. You have lecture at home, and you have in-class problem solving. The reason I didn't put too much there is because, like I said, it's going to look different for everyone, but the general premise is going to stay the same. And just to give you an example that it's not going to work for everyone, for every single, or that every class is going to be different. As Sarah said, I teach general and organic chemistry, and the organic chemistry is more advanced students. They're second or third year students, and so they have matured in their job as a student, and so they can handle a significant amount of responsibility, whereas students who are fresh out of high school and first-time freshmen, I have to be very selective in how much responsibility I put on them in this classroom. Organic was the first one that I flipped, and so trying to take the same approaches that I've used in the organic classroom and moving those over to the general classroom, I found out very quickly that the students needed a different approach. It's not a problem with the flipped approach, it's a problem with how I am choosing to deliver the material and how much responsibility I am putting on them. One thing that I would also like to say is that for me there are two main components to the flip. There's the why, or I'm sorry, there's the how that I hope to show you over the course of the webinar, but there's also a big why component. Why flip your classroom? Why change from this traditional approach? And whenever I took chemistry in college, I was taught chemistry by one of, I consider her one of the best professors that I've ever had. But she was very much a traditionalist. She did exactly what is on the left-hand side of the scale. She would come to class, she would give us notes, we would take those notes, she would fill the blackboard 18 to 20 times during a lecture. She would leave covered in chalk. I would go home and work problems on my own, and for me, I thrived in that environment. I could tell that she was passionate about what she was doing, and that made me eager to learn the material. So after graduate school, my first night in the classroom, I started teaching night classes. I came in and I really wanted to model her technique, and so I had my notebook full of notes set down, and I just went to town writing notes and giving this passionate, heartfelt lecture. And I left, or I ended the lecture fully expecting students to come up and shake my hand and tell me that it was the best, most stimulating lecture that they had ever had, and that I had just changed their college experience. That really was not the case at all. It was quite a humbling experience. I have very rarely seen students flee a classroom as quickly as they did after that very first lecture. And so that was a big awakening moment for me, that why you want to flip something really has less to do with you as an educator, but it has so much more to do with the way the students are learning and how much I can actually teach them. And when I say teach, I mean teach. I don't mean how much stuff can I cram into a semester and say that I taught the students this amount of material because I covered it and was able to test on it. But how much can I actually teach them so that they retain and can actually use that material? We're going to look at some actual numbers in a bit that lets me show you how I measure how much I'm actually teaching them. But I will say, just in a qualitative approach or a qualitative summary, that flipping the classroom, I have taught students more in the few years that I have been flipped than in all of the semesters of just plain traditional lecture combined. So if we look at some of the benefits for a flipped classroom, and one of my philosophies on why this is such a beneficial approach, let's consider the picture that's on the screen. In a normal traditional lecture, the professor is going to come in, and Module 1 is going to teach the students how to prepare the chicken. Module 2 will prepare the students on the correct techniques the correct techniques for making the potatoes, and then you end up with Module 3 that walks them through preparing the actual beverage. Once you complete this lecture series, you administer an exam that tests whether or not they were able to gauge what you talk about in lecture. And then you move on because the lesson over how to dredge your chicken before you fry it took 2 lectures too long, and now you're behind for the rest of the semester, and you have to play catch up. In a flipped classroom, the way that this scenario would play out is the students are exposed to preparing the chicken, preparing the potatoes, preparing the beverage before they ever set foot in my classroom door. Whenever they come in to the classroom, I can now spend 15 to 20 minutes reviewing those basic fundamental techniques, and then I can move on to things that I normally would not get to talk about in a normal semester. I can talk about flavor combinations, why these flavors pair well together. Recipe alterations. Suppose we wanted a crispier crust on the chicken. What are potential ways that we could make that happen? Or maybe the recipe called for the chicken to be mild and we want it extra spicy. We can add things to it and combine things that we haven't been able to do in the past. We can also bring critical thinking into this. The students would have seen how to prepare the meal before they come to class, the basics on the techniques of preparation. But I can force them to do critical thinking problems by saying, suppose you had to prepare this meal and you're preparing it for 20 people and everything has to be done at the same time so that everyone eats at exactly the same time. Organize yourself into groups and devise a way to make this happen. So not only do they have to know how to prepare the chicken and the potatoes and the beverage, but they also have to apply critical thinking skills so that it's not just, okay, dredge the chicken and then cut the potatoes and make sure your oil is at 350. You are using other critical thinking skills and building upon those so that you are getting a higher level of learning rather than just regular rote memorization. As Sarah said, in my spare time, I do attempt to play golf. So in case you're not a cook, I do have a golf example. And let's consider the following scenario. In class, we're in a golf class, and we want this class to be a flipped classroom. How are we going to do that? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to provide the students with notes ahead of time that teach them the basics of the game of golf. I'm going to give them interactive exercises that teach them the layout of a golf course, that teach them the different types of hazards, what the different clubs mean, when to use a driver, when to use an iron, when to use a putter, the difference in the types of golf balls that you can buy, and the difference in the types of shots and direction and spin that you can put on the ball and things like that. So they have been exposed to the fundamental concepts before they ever come to class once again. And then when they come to class, I provide them with the scenario that's on the screen. In their golf bag, they have the following clubs, and I tell them the yardage that they can hit each of those golf clubs. And we talk about the shots that we're good at and the shots that we're poor at, and then we look at this actual golf course hole. And we're at the starting point, and the distances are laid out much like they are on an actual golf course and scorecard. How are you going to play this hole using the techniques that you learned before you came to lecture so that you make the ball in the hole in as few of possible shots as you can. So again, it's less about learning the fundamentals in class and more about applying those fundamental and core concepts to whatever the subject is before they ever get to class. So if we look at my strategy for actually implementing this into a classroom, it's an actual process, and each step stems from the ones above. So the first thing that's going to happen is the material is going to be made available to the students before they ever get to lecture. This material is going to be in, for me it's in a PDF form, so that students have the option to print or to download it to an electronic device. But in that material, I've got just text that is a summary of the things in their textbook. I've got websites, I've got SoftChalk activities, I've got YouTube videos, I have tutorial videos that I've taken the time to create, websites, anything that I think may tailor to any learning style that's out there and that relates to the material at hand, I'm going to put in these notes so that the students have as much at their disposal to use and to build on those concepts as they can. To make sure that they are doing this, to actually hold them accountable, we do pre-lecture quizzes. So this can be in class or out of class. The platform that we use allows for that option. And it's kind of a guide for their learning. I can build these quizzes, and I really don't care if they use their notes or not while they go through these quizzes if I give them out of class. I'm using these for one purpose. I'm trying to tailor and focus the student in on exactly the main points that I want them to come to lecture with. If they come to lecture with these 6 or 8 main basic concepts, then we're going to be able to have a productive and engaging lecture whenever they get there. So I use the quizzes as part of their grade, but it's more of a guide to focus in on exactly what I want them to get out of these big PDF files that I send them that sometimes have 17 to 20 pages worth of notes. It just helps them weed through what they view as a lot of material. Once they get to lecture, it is a big focus for me for this lecture to be engaging. So I look for things like discussions or group work, or how can I make them solve these organic problems using critical thinking skills, or how can I relate what we just took a quiz over to everyday life. Can I begin to merge different disciplines? Maybe if we're talking about a specific type of group that is present in a drug that was just released on the market, can I make that gap? Or can we bridge chemistry and biology, where we look at these interactions and how these compounds react inside of our body? So it's more than just this is an alcohol and this is how it reacts. Lecture is more engaging and critical thinking. Hopefully at this point, once they have been exposed to the material before lecture, and then once they have come to class and we have worked these critical thinking problems, all the while referring to and reinforcing those main core concepts that I wanted them to come to lecture with, then they have a more solid foundation with which to return to the material and tie up any loose ends. And again, this is where the YouTube videos and the SoftChalk presentations really come in handy. They can watch the videos over and over again, or they can go out on their own and critique some of the other videos that are on YouTube. I know that Dr. Smith gave me a good video. How does this other video stack up? Is it useful information? Is it correct? Is it legitimate? Or is this put on YouTube by someone that really has no idea what they're talking about? So even outside of class, they're using these critical thinking skills to evaluate the material that I want them to be able to use. SoftChalks serve the same purpose, interactive exercises where the students can have practice and they can also receive feedback. And we'll look at some of the ways that I do that here in just a bit. After all of this is done and completed, then comes the exam, and we will talk in great detail about a new exam question that I have started to use called a verbal response question, where the students actually come in and verbally answer a question that in the past I would have them write in essay format or whatever on their actual exam. So now that we know the strategy, we'll kind of look at a little bit about how I make this actually viable in the classroom. And so one of the first things that I did was to start a web page. And this is a web page where I put everything that the students will need for the class. Now, Walker State uses Desire to Learn as a course management system. We do have one of those in place, and this is not a replacement to that by any means. This is a tool that I chose to use in order to share this information with as many people as possible and make this the access available to the students. So everything that's in my course management system page for the particular class is also on this web page. And so you can see it's got the syllabi, it's got the requirements for the text, internet sites that I find particularly useful, and different apps that they may come in handy with. Over here are all of their notes so that they can look ahead and see what the notes will entail, and then actually the problems that we're going to focus on in the lecture. Reminders of our chemistry past, things that they need from general chemistry that are going to spill over into organic. And then the labs are here also. And it's more of a struggle to incorporate all of this technology into the lab, but that's one of the next best, or the next things on the list. I thought it would be fun to have advice from former students, so people that have, and they will tell you they survived organic chemistry. Students that have been through the class and want to offer advice for the students. I allow them access to put all of this, to put those comments on the webpage. And so this is just a nice, concise method for distributing all of the material that they're going to need over the course of the semester. It also gives me a way to easily share it with others whenever I travel or conferences or things like that. So feel free to use anything on here. Feel free to browse and look through everything. I'm not going to swear to you that there are no typos in the notes. My wife is the English major, and spelling was not a gift that I was blessed with. So if you find any typos or anything like that, please overlook them. But feel free to look at this material and get an idea of the way that I have tried to organize this course. Once the students have obtained access to the actual material, we'll look at a little bit about, or a little bit of what they will actually see. So what I have showing right now is actually an excerpt of a section of notes that I have prepared for the students. And so this particular section is over stereoisomerism and chirality. And so the notes, you can see, do resemble a textbook. I've got the key terms highlighted. I've got pictures that come from the textbook, structures of molecules and definitions, and important things to point out for the students. And so at this point, there's really nothing different than what they could get from their textbook or leave a traditional lecture with. But if they keep scrolling down, the next thing that they come to is an actual YouTube video that will go in and summarize and re-explain everything that they had just read up to that point. So even if the students do choose not to read it, they do have an electronic version that has an explanation that I am comfortable with being sufficient for them to watch and have mastered the material. If they keep going further, watching YouTube videos is nice, but it's also nice to have some practice. And so I also embed my SoftChalk exercises into the notes. And so whenever the students click on the SoftChalk link, a SoftChalk exercise opens up. And a lot of times it's just one or two exercises that I want them to focus on. But many times, hopefully, if they didn't read the text, if I put the text and the main points here in SoftChalk, once again, it's just one more chance that they're going to bump into the material and be exposed to what I want them to have been exposed to before they ever come to class. Here again is the YouTube video that I can embed in SoftChalk and have them watch it in case they opted not to watch the video from the notes. And so the definitions, I use the text popper feature that is in SoftChalk. I love that, to where I can highlight a definition and actually or highlight a word and make the definition pop up, so that students can just move their mouse or touch with their finger, and everything actually pops up so that they know what that term means. And believe it or not, I consider this a great form of engagement. It's very basic, but the students are still having to do something to get that definition. They read this, and it's the first time they've seen the word enantiomer. They're not going to know what that means. And so just by having them move their mouse to it and actually complete a small, engaging task, I feel like that lays the foundation for some of the things that they're going to do later on. Some of the other exercises that I love, I'll put a picture of a molecule in here and just ask some random questions about it. And I do this because of the features built into SoftChalk that allow me to give hints and to actually provide feedback. So if a student clicks on this and they hit true and they check their answer, they see that it's incorrect, but then they can go back and view a hint and actually analyze that molecule. And so they can do this at whatever hour of the night or the morning or the afternoon or whenever they choose to do it, and they can get an explanation or a hint or guidance from me, and they don't have to send me an email or drop by my office in order to do that. Now, I still encourage all of those forms of communication, but it's nice for them to be able to do this on their own, and for me to be able to build hints in without these students actually having to ask me for it. So I love the questions, I love the quizzing features, and the ability to assign points to this, or to have them print out a certificate of completion so that I know that they went through the actual SoftChalk exercise. One of the biggest features in SoftChalk that I use is the multiple selector, the matching, where I can have a reaction. And in organic chemistry, so much of what we do is based upon conditions and is situational. And so I can have the students analyze the conditions of the reaction and select everything that applies to that reaction, and ultimately end up at a conclusion for what the product can be. And so the features where they can come in and select different conditions and immediately see what they got correct and what they got wrong is a very beneficial process for them. The feedback that I collected from the students about what they liked and what they didn't in terms of their SoftChalk exercises, this application right here was one of the highest, or received the highest praise from the students. To be able to see all of the concepts that we talked about in the semester and that they saw in their notes, and then to be forced to select the ones that apply, and then be able to instantaneously see what they got correct and what they got wrong, what they know and what they need to improve on, they felt was very beneficial. And as we'll see in a little while, it shows on their exam scores and the performance of a flipped classroom versus a non-flipped classroom. So if we look at what comes next in the outline, we have seen the notes. The next thing on the list would actually be having the students participate in some sort of pre-lecture quiz. And so the one that I have chosen to use is GoClass. The ability to assign points in SoftChalk makes that a very viable option. Also, GoClass is just another platform, and it's for me, it's one. I use it just to keep from using the same thing over and over and over again. Same thing with YouTube videos and internet sites, and I just want to put as much in there as I can and keep the students from bogging down and feeling like the class is going towards monotony. If I can keep introducing new things and use one platform for this purpose and one platform for that purpose, it's a lot of variety, and it seems to keep them from getting bored and from giving up mid-semester. So GoClass is a device-agnostic platform. It works for Apple devices, for PC, for Android. Anything that you can connect to the internet, you can use GoClass with. GoClass allows the instructor to control the session and push material to the students, or to have the students actually interact and ask a question on the spot, or to be able to draw on an image and map out a reaction concept, or using a poll feature or a multiple select feature, which is all very similar to things that I can find in SoftChalk. GoClass also works like SoftChalk in that I can use it as a flipped approach, kind of a homework scenario, where I can assign specific problems and then have the students answer questions over those problems. And so this is what I primarily use for the pre-lecture quizzes. The students will have the material several days in advance, and then before we actually get to the lecture, I will assign a pre-lecture quiz, 8 to 10 questions for the most part, that the students will answer before they ever come to lecture. I can view those results before they get there and have an immediate idea as to what I need to spend time remediating on before we get into the nitty-gritty and the really tough problems, and really gauge how I'm going to spend the rest of my lecture. The students can also go back and access this material for studying on their own at a later time. Once they get to lecture, so once they've looked at the exercises and then have taken the pre-lecture quiz and they come back to lecture, what is that lecture going to look like? And so you probably have already gauged that it's not going to be a traditional lecture. The students are going to be provided with problems before they ever come to lecture. I do this in electronic format so that the ones that are more traditional students and would like to print this out and still take notes and solve problems using pen and paper are capable to do that. It allows them to be comfortable with their learning styles. It also allows for students to use tablets and in any other electronic device that they would like for note-taking and sharing in class. And so the way that I encourage the students to do it is to download the material to Dropbox on their iPad or tablet, and then to open it in some sort of note-taking app that allows them to annotate over these PDF files. We can work problems, they can take notes on the iPad, and then they can send it all back to Dropbox or store it in that note-taking app so that they can access it wherever they need to, and they don't have to carry around a big binder with them. So really the question is, how do I take something like organic chemistry, which is notorious for being difficult and impossible and just thousands upon thousands of different concepts, and that I ultimately end up going all the way to the end of the semester and still feeling like I run out of time? How can I take a course that is as strenuous as that and allow for this freedom to creatively think and challenge their learning of the material? And the answer is actually pretty simple. It lends itself to it quite well. So think back to the chicken and the golf examples and the questions that I said I would pose in lecture if it was a flipped environment for those different scenarios. And let's take pseudoephedrine. And if we look at its chemical structure, it's got components that I lecture in organic chemistry about all the time. There's an alcohol group. There's stereochemistry built into the molecule. It contains amines. It has an aromatic functionality to it. There's a lot of topic in this molecule. And normally what I do is I spend a chapter on alcohols, and I spend a chapter on stereochemistry, and a chapter on amines, and several chapters on aromatic compounds, and we move on, and we never tie everything together. But now that most of the learning the core concepts about what an alcohol is and how it reacts and its properties are being done outside of class, I can now use this molecule and focus on what is actually going on. How does a big pharmaceutical company actually make this? We've looked at reactions of alcohols and amines and aromatic compounds, but we've never really put them all together. So let's start from scratch and actually make this molecule. Once they have a synthesis down for it, okay, well, here's the answer to how a pharmaceutical company makes it. And what is the advantage of them making it this way over the way that you chose to do it? What are the stereochemical implications of the alcohol and the amine group? I can begin to talk about drug receptor interactions and branch over into biology. Would pseudoephedrine still be as potent of a drug if we use the enantiomer of this, or if we use the diastereomer of this? And it forces the students to learn those key concepts, but it also forces them to apply it. They have to think about what the implications of an alcohol being polar and being able to hydrogen bond, and what the implications of the stereochemistry are, and how it affects the drug's action, and how all of these things come together to make pseudoephedrine what it is. And so it's much more analytical in its nature than just talking about alcohols and stereochemistry and amines in one chapter to the next, and never really being able to tie them all together. So hopefully the two examples before made it somewhat clear how the flipped lecture was going to go, but hopefully this gives you an idea as to the level that the students are going or approaching the material in the flipped classroom. Being a flipped classroom also allows for multiple ways to engage the students in lecture. Some days it's beneficial for me to get up and lead the charge, to actually have it more of a discussion-based approach where I lay out the problem and the students guide me through what they think is the best way to do that. Other times group work works well, where we'll review the material whenever they come to class, and then I give them an assignment, and they actually have to take and analyze it and work together as peers to arrive at a solution. And a lot of times it'll be student-led. We'll be talking about something, and then a student will throw out a random or an idea related to what we just talked about, and class goes off in a completely different direction than where I had intended it to go, but it's still along a path that's related to the material that they were exposed to before they came to class. So the fact that sometimes students will begin to direct the path that lecture is taking is just a great confirmation to me that they are using these analytical and critical thinking skills that I want them to develop. One other piece of technology that we have in our classrooms that is extremely beneficial is Apple TV. And it allows an iPad to mirror the projector. So a student working a problem or taking notes or whatever, if they're doing it on an iPad, they can actually project their iPad onto the screen so that the other students can see exactly what they're talking about, and so I can see what they're talking about. And it makes answering questions so much easier, where they can actually show me what it is that they're talking about. I also use this for group work. Once the students have completed a project, then they've got to share why they think their approach is the best. So they project their solution up on the Apple TV, and the rest of the class critiques their work. Is this the most efficient way to do it, or is there an actual better way to do it? What are the advantages of one way over the other? So it's much less me being the primary person on the stage and then listening to me, and it's becoming more and more and more the students actually teaching themselves and providing feedback and guiding the lecture. And it makes lecture so much more enjoyable whenever they do this. And in traditional lecture, shame on me, but there were plenty of times whenever I felt just so pressed to get through the material that I remember students asking questions, and I'm like, oh, really? Another question? I don't understand how much stuff we have to get through. And that anxiety of not being able to finish the material, and that I can't possibly tolerate another question, that anxiety being gone is the most freeing feeling to lead a classroom. And so there's no way I could ever go back to traditional lecture now that I've seen the benefits of this. One last component that I feel is very beneficial, and you're not going to find this in every single flipped classroom, because it's really not taking an aspect of lecture and moving it to the students doing it at home and then bringing problem solving and bringing it to the lecture. But I do feel it's important, and I have started a verbal response question. And so most of the students that are taking organic chemistry are on their way to medical school or pharmacy school or dental school or vet school or any other number of a highly competitive professional program. And my rationale for this is I want my students to be able to go to these interviews and to be able to competently and confidently talk about complex material. I don't want them to go in and have to answer their admission questions in the same way that they would usually talk with their friends about what they did on the weekend. I want them to be able to use quote-unquote big words and nice, well thought out explanations. And so I treat this very much like an interview. The students are provided with sample questions so that they kind of have an idea of what to expect whenever they come in to the lecture. And they come in and they sit down, and we begin the interview. And I try to make it more of a dialogue, so I'll pose an initial question, and then based off of their response, I will elaborate and go as deep as I possibly can go with the student. Sometimes it's one or two questions. I had a student leave my office the other day, and Dr. Smith, man, I think you asked me like 10 questions during that verbal response, and I was just so nervous, and it made me so uncomfortable. But he did a wonderful job on it, and he maintained his composure through that anxiety, and he answered everything that I asked him completely correct. So the ability to think on their feet and provide an elaborate and well thought out and concise answer. Conciseness is one thing that I stress in this. And I encourage them to get to the point and make the point and move on. That in these admissions interviews, they really don't expect you to beat around the bush and things like that. Answer the question and move on. I record the students, and then at the end of the semester, as part of their grade requirement, they have to watch the videos and then critique their interview etiquette. And so I do this for two reasons. One, I want them to actually see what they sound like, or to hear what they sound like and see what they look like during this interview process, so that they know if they reach up and twirl their hair, or if they pull their gum out of their mouth and string it around their finger, or look to the ceiling like the answer is going to fall out of the ceiling tile. I have some students that will spin in the chair, and they get so close to actually making a full circle during the interview, but they come back and I had no idea that I did that. I'm just completely oblivious to the fact that they were spinning in their chair. And so this is beneficial because it forces them to be able to master the chemistry material at a level to which they can talk about it without using pen and paper and writing things down. But it also teaches them habits that they need to work on so that whenever they go out and interview for these highly competitive positions, they are doing so in a very professional manner. And so this is one component that most students will tell you that they absolutely hate, but they absolutely know is beneficial. So they do it out of knowing that it's good for them, not out of actually liking it. Maybe I need to call this more like the Brussels sprouts experiment or Brussels sprouts aspect. You eat it because it's good for you, not because you like it. So right now, this is exactly what my flipped classroom looks like. I have taken you through everything that the students experience from start to finish, from the notes at home to the pre-lecture quizzes to the questions that we ask in lecture, and then back to reviewing the materials, and then actually through the exam process. What I want to talk about now for just a very brief little bit is two things that I want to implement next go around. I have these for this semester, but they have met stiff resistance from the students because they feel overwhelmed and it wasn't in their syllabus, and they have no problem holding it over my head that this aspect is not in their syllabus and it should not count for a grade, and so they really don't have to do it. So it's going in the syllabus for next semester. But what's on the screen now is a depiction of Bloom's taxonomy. And so all of the educators and probably most everyone else knows that this is 6 different levels of learning. And at the very bottom you have remembering and understanding. And then up at the top where you're actually analyzing and using multiple skills, critical thinking, you get to the analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And the higher up you move in this pyramid, or in this arrow, the more beneficial the actual learning is. The more likely it is to stick with the students, and the more likely they are to be able to use it at a later time. And so, honestly, I really don't know where I'm at right now. If I had to guess, I would say that I'm probably somewhere in the applying, analyzing, maybe the evaluating categories. But I would really like to get up to the creating, where the students are actually creating aspects of the class that is going to be beneficial to their learning. And so 2 technologies that I found with which to do this. The first one is called Coggle. And Coggle is a mind mapping software. It's free. The website is coggle.it. And it's very user-friendly, very straightforward, and it allows for you to very easily tie multiple concepts together and see how they relate. So what I've done here is I've gone in and actually built just a very general Coggle mind map, and it's over a subject that typically is one of the more difficult ones for the students in the class, substitution reactions. And so the way that this map is outlined, the blue arrows go to just general topics. And then if you look over to the left-hand side, you have 2 types of substitution reactions. You have what are called SN1 and SN2. And I have color-coded those arrows. So SN1 is red and SN2 is green. And then over in the other parts of the mind map, everything that relates to SN1 is going to be red, and everything that relates to SN2 will be green. And so the students can go through and build maps using this type of approach and see how everything relates and ties together. This right here is probably 18 to 20 pages of text that has been combined into this, this one basic mind map. The thing that I like about Coggle is it works like Google Docs in that the students can actually collaborate with each other. So one student can start one and then share it with their neighbor. And so my ultimate vision for this is for me to go in and start the Coggle and share it with the entire class, and there be one mind map that the whole entire class is working on for each of the main topics that we use or that we cover in lecture. So I can see what the students are thinking. I can go in and edit it and make sure that everything is correct. But it forces the students to go in and begin to tie things together and collaborate and work together and actually create something that that will be beneficial to them over the course of the semester. The next thing that I would like to implement is called iStopMotion for iPad. And I was perusing one of the apps of the day that's gone free websites or applications on my iPad. And to be honest, the first thing that I'll look at is the price. If this app is extremely expensive and it's free for the day, then it's probably not the best philosophy, but I equate oftentimes goodness of the app with price. And so this one was rather pricey and it was free, and so I said, well, I really don't know what stop motion is, but I'm going to go ahead and download it and I'll figure that out later. At least I have it while it's free. And I don't know if you remember the show Gumby that used to come on TV, but it was a claymation video, and so some artist would build the Gumby figure and put them in a particular position and take a picture and then move the figure to a different position and take a picture, and then you string it together and you get this claymation or flipbook type of movie. And I thought, well, this is really neat, but how in the world am I going to use this in my chemistry class? And so I thought, what is one of the most challenging things that chemistry students have to face? And that's, at least in my class, it's reaction mechanisms. And so mechanisms are how we depict the atoms and the electrons moving from one place to another so that your reactant molecules become your product molecules. It doesn't just happen magically, and it's hard to get the students to realize that there's a step-by-step order that has to take place for this reaction to occur. And so I thought, well, maybe if I put the molecules in the hands of the students and then use this app to actually build videos of the mechanisms, then they would be creating something that would be beneficial and be a good study tool. And so I went into to a green screen, and this is something that I have created, and it's relatively short. It took just a couple of 10-15 minutes for me to actually do. And if it will play, I would like to show you what I envision this process looking like. So there's the general reaction. And then the molecules actually come together, and you can see the bonds that form. You can see your products, and it actually cut out on me, but it would be left with the actual ending product. And I know that was really fast, and there are ways in the app to slow it down so that the students can actually get information from it. But I just wanted you to get a general idea of what the vision is for that. And so the students would build the molecules and have the atoms come together and the molecules come together and move to the correct place so that their reactants became the correct products. And this would have them create the mechanisms that they struggle with, as opposed to just writing them down on pen and paper over and over and over again until they feel like they have mastered that material. So you've seen what I'm currently doing. You've seen where I want to go. Now, is it beneficial? Is there any merit to what I'm doing? And so we'll begin with just a few statistics on just general poll questions that I asked the student. And so do the students feel like the pre-class material and the in-class exercises prepared them properly for an exam? And to be honest, I really didn't care whether they told me that they were comparable in difficulty or whether one was more difficult than the other. What I did not want to see was that they were on completely different levels of difficulty and the students did not feel at all prepared. So as long as this 3% category was not any higher than what it was, I was content. I see 54% that say they're similar in difficulty, but the exam makes me think a bit more, and 43% say they're right on par with each other. The lecture material and the exam are the same difficulty. I didn't care which of those they selected as long as they were not telling me that lecture is right here and the exam is way above it in terms of difficulty and next to impossible to do. So this hopefully was confirmation to me that the students were using the materials in the way that I had designed them to be used. At Walker State, we have plenty of classes that have not converted over to Flip, and they are still very traditional in their approach. And many of my students are actually in these classes at the same time that they are in my Flip class. And so I asked them to compare this to other classes that they've had in terms of how engaging they are, how they prepare you for tests, and whether you actually enjoy what you were doing or not. And again, an overwhelming response said that they're more engaging, they prepare them better, and they are more enjoyable. So check marks for all three of the points that I really wanted. The group that said they're more engaging but they don't feel better prepared for the exam, I will address that in just a second based upon some actual student comments that I received. And so I wanted to show you the good comments along with the bad comments. The ones in blue are positive, and so for the most part, all of the comments that I received from the students on end of the year evaluations and just random surveys that I sent out were extremely positive. They liked the classroom. They felt it was a bit intimidating at first, but once they got the hang of it, they could really see the benefit. More application helps with visualizing the materials. It provides better reinforcement for memorization and understanding the reactions and the mechanisms. But my absolute favorite quote or comment that I got was the last blue one, where the student says, "It takes responsibility on the student's part, but it's beneficial." How successful it is just depends, or will ultimately depend on the student. And I think a lot of that goes back to whether or not they feel better prepared for the exams. I know I'm kind of biased, but I think if they follow the advice that I provide them in the syllabus and they review the material before and they take the pre-lecture quizzes seriously, and then they come to class and they look for ways that the critical thinking problems relate back to those core concepts that they learned, and then they go back and review the SoftChalks and the Go classes and the YouTube videos until they have mastered that material. Then they come in and they feel much better prepared for the exam. I think this student hits it right on the head that the ones that feel ill prepared for the exam have not taken the same level of responsibility in placing learning on themselves as the ones that feel prepared for the exams. And I liked their last comment. I like it, but it's still organic chemistry. So organic chemistry is always going to be organic chemistry, I guess. And that same responsibility idea, that same concept, I think applies and has merit as to why the comments that I got in terms of the flipped classroom being a negative experience hold true. They didn't like the flipped classroom. They felt like all they know from class is problems and not the ideas, theories, and reasons why we did the problems that we did. Well, that tells me that they didn't review the material. They didn't utilize everything that I gave them to their fullest extent. Now, I'm by no means calling them, accusing them of not doing anything at all, but I feel like that there's enough there that if the students will apply it the way it's meant to be applied, that there's no reason that they should leave with all we did was work problems and it had nothing to do with the concepts that are in the textbook. I tried very, very hard to reinforce those concepts in lecture. And I encourage the students that if they ever feel like this, come to my office hours and let's work this out face to face and figure out how you need to approach the class in order for you to be successful. Same thing with I find that I tend to get more behind in the flipped course. It is responsibility. They do have to keep up. It is much easier to fall behind in this class and then get caught up if you are not staying on top of it as you should. But to me, that teaches them work ethic, which is something that I consider very strongly when writing letter of recommendations. Is this student a go-getter, or is this student one that waits till the last minute on every single thing that we do over the course of the semester? And the go-getters, the hard workers, the ones that do not procrastinate, are the ones that are successful, and the ones that that take a course that students used to be happy with a C and are now banging out A's and B's without any problem at all. So responsibility on the student's part is the key to having a successful flipped classroom. And just to show some actual numbers, here are my exam averages. The ones in blue are the lecture exam averages in a traditional non-flipped class. The ones shown in red are the exam averages over, it's not the same exam. I didn't use the exact same questions, but I did gauge the difficulty and made sure that the non-traditional exam was comparable to the traditional exam that I gave. And you can see in the flipped classroom, there was not a single exam that did not increase by a significant percentage. The one that I thought was really just an errant data point was exam 3, where the scores increased by 36% from one class to another. And I thought, well, maybe I messed up and I printed out the exam. Maybe I gave them a practice exam or something, because this average is so high for this material. And I went back and looked at lesson plans and what we had actually done in lecture, and that was material where the vast majority of lecture had been spent in group work, where the students were working as peers and teaching each other. The other percentages, there was less group work and more discussion between instructor and class. So it was still engaging, but it was not the peer-on-peer tutoring that they received for exam 3. And so I'm firmly convinced that that the peer-to-peer tutoring and group work plays a vital role in having a good, successful lecture. The final exam, the questions were exactly the same from one semester to another. We give standardized comprehensive finals, and we use these same questions from year to year. And so you can see that it increased about 10%, 9%, which is kind of right in line with where I expected it to be based upon the percentages that I saw for the lecture exams. So I'm ecstatic about these results. The students seem to enjoy lecture significantly more. I have excellent numbers that I'm proud to show off and present to my dean and present to my vice president, saying, "Look, this is actually working. All of this mobilization, or all of these mobilization efforts that Walker State has spent so much time investing in, are paying off, and our students are learning at a higher level." But as I conclude and as we summarize, the summary points are here, and we've talked about them over and over. But the main thing is the student interaction and performance has increased. But I would continue this approach even if student performance had stayed exactly the same, or even if it had tailed off a little bit from one semester to the next, or if it was slightly lower than traditional, or than the scores on the traditional lecture. And the reason for that is simple. Exams are a single point in time, and I'm measuring, I'm getting a score from what the students tell me at that single point. But hearing the students talk in lab, hearing the way that they come by and ask questions, hearing the way that they phrase their answers in lecture and the way that they phrase their answers on the verbal response, and the level of the questions that they are asking in lecture now as opposed to traditional lecture tell me that they are benefiting from this approach. So knowing that they are benefiting from it by being able to interact with them would be cause enough for me to continue the flipped approach, even if their single exam scores had gone down in terms of score. The last point that I will leave you with is, if you are toying with the notion of flipping your classroom, or if you have already flipped your classroom and you feel like it's a struggle, two things. Don't quit. You're probably not going to get it right the first time. I think I'm on about version 10.0 in terms of flipping this classroom. Don't quit. It's beneficial. Stay true to the course and see it through. It is beneficial. It will help. And it makes the job easier if you can have fun doing it. If you have fun preparing the lecture materials and interacting with the students and enjoy how engaging the lectures can become and how far you can challenge the students to go, your role as a professor and as an instructor will increase, and you will receive so much more just fulfillment from your daily tasks. With that, I will conclude. If you have any desire to contact me or to talk further about this, please use the email address that I provided. Access the website, look at the materials, the Walker State webpage, the SoftChalk webpage that Sarah mentioned. All of these are very useful, and my flipped classroom would not be what it is without the use of those training websites. And so if you're having trouble with it, please reach out to me or to SoftChalk or to Walter State or anyone else. And the ones that do this enjoy doing this and will be more than happy to help you become the best that you can be with these technology tools. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew, so much. That was such an informative presentation. Do you have time to answer a couple questions?
I do.
Okay. There was a couple that just came up a few times that you can probably answer. So at the beginning, when you showed your web page, someone asks, how hard do you find it to keep up with your D2L site as well as the M-Organic page? And have you considered just putting your SoftChalk pages directly into Desire to Learn? Or do you find it better to have them separated like that?
So the first part, how difficult is it to keep both of them up at the same time? I actually know very little about web page design. The platform that we use is called LibGuides, and it is a very user-friendly platform, and it's basically boxes. And so you think, okay, well, I want a box that has this material, and so you build a box and you upload files to that. So maintaining the website is not very difficult. For me, the key is I have to update one whenever I update the other. And so updating the Desire to Learn, 2 or 3 sections of organic, and then uploading a file to the website, it really doesn't take that much time. And once you get the hang of, okay, I'm adding this material, I've got to add it to both places, it really becomes second nature, and they're very easy to edit. A lot of the features are just kind of drag and drop, where you can find the file and just drag it over and it automatically uploads. So you spend less time searching on your computer for the files. So my advice is, if you're going to have both, do both at the same time. In terms of uploading SoftChalks directly to Desire to Learn, there are several faculty, in fact most of the faculty on Walter State's campus do upload their SoftChalks directly to the Desire to Learn site, so that students will go into the course management system, access the content modules, and the SoftChalk exercise will be right there for them. And if I'm going to use SoftChalk and it actually be counted as a quiz or as a grade, that would be the approach that I would take also. For me, since SoftChalk is playing the role of more of a practice type feature and guiding them and providing them hints and less of a grade component, I wanted it to be embedded in their notes so that everything is right there whenever they're studying. So being able to hyperlink the SoftChalks in to those PDF files, and then having the students download them to their tablet or to their laptop, and the ability for everything to go in one place with that student so that they can read the text, they can watch the YouTube video, they can access the internet sites, and they can access the SoftChalks without having to go back and forth to D2L, for me was a plus. But again, if I were doing it for a grade, I would definitely put it right into Desire to Learn so that I would have the capability to link it with the gradebook.
And what was the name of the platform that you mentioned that Walter State uses for the web pages?
LibGuides.
Okay. Someone was asking about that as well. And then another question that came up a few times is, how large are your sections? So how many students do you have about each semester?
For Organic 1, the sections are usually 28 to 32 students. And I would love to have a large section, like I would expect to have at a four-year institution or something like that, where the chemistry classes are several hundred students. I would be very eager to try this approach out in that environment. But since we are a smaller institution, most of our sections run 28 to 30 students the first semester. After the first semester, either students don't make it through or they have a change of heart as to their major. So second semester sections are more on the lines of 15 to 20.
Okay. And I think we have time for one more question. There was a few that came in about the verbal response questions that you had mentioned. Right. So someone asks, how many times per semester do you do these, and are they done in front of the entire class or individually?
Okay, good questions. I usually give 4 to 5 exams a semester, and so part of their exam comes from doing the verbal response. So right now, this is a brand new feature that I've incorporated. And so right now, I just do it for each exam. So the students will do it 4 or 5 times a semester. And it is not done in front of other students. I try to keep it very much as a professional interview, to where it's the interviewer and the interviewee. So I give them the option. They can come to my office and do the question. I also give them the option to video conference in, so use FaceTime or Ubu or Adobe Connect or anything else that will allow them to communicate me mobilely, as long as I can see their picture and record their actions so that they can do the critique of their interviews at the end of the semester. Ultimately, I would love to do this over each chapter. So whenever we finish chapter 1, we do a verbal response over chapter 1, just so that I'm not picking just one random topic to ask them about whenever their exam is covering 3 or 4 chapters.
Yeah, I think you answered that question. I think that's all the questions that we have time for today, but thank you again so much, Matthew, for your presentation. It was extremely informative, and from the comments, it seems like everyone really benefited a lot. I'm going to go ahead and take back the screen, unless you have anything else that you'd like to share.
I do not. And even though we don't have time for questions, please, again, audience, if you have anything that you would like to specifically ask, feel free to email, and I will get back with you on that.
Yes, and I will go ahead and share my slide, and Matthew's email address is on the slide as well. So again, thank you so much, Matthew, for taking your time to share all this with us. Like you said, I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all of the questions, but feel free to send Matthew an email, or if you have any questions about SoftChalk, you can email us as well at learnmore@softchalk.com or by visiting the SoftChalk website. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. And I hope you all have a great afternoon.